What if I told you that debt isn't just financial, it's energetic? That every unpaid bill, every loan, every negative balance is really just a reflection of your power that you haven't reclaimed. Now, in this video, I'll reveal how debt is more spiritual than you've been told, how energy exchange governs your financial life, and how to reclaim what's yours without playing their game. Now, before we dive into this video, I want you guys to understand that I've studied trust law, contract law, consumer protection, spiritual commerce, and today I'll show you how your debt is a symptom of forgotten sovereignty. Now, before we dive into this video, make sure to like the video. Make sure to do that because that's just gonna push the algorithm and allow people to see content like this. What we're gonna be talking about is really just to help you shift your mindset as it pertains to debt and, move with more energy when it comes to the concepts that I talk about. Again, this is not financial advice. This is not legal advice, despite all the research and all the studying that I do, and despite all the good information I can give, okay? I wouldn't tell anybody to employ these strategies without doing their own due diligence. All right. So if you guys have that covered, remember to hit that like button. OK, not only would that help me, but that just helps this video get out to people who really need it, who are on this frequency energetically. You dig me? Now, what we're going to be talking about today is a few things, man. We're going to be talking about how debt is a claim against your energy. We're going to talk about where the shadow originates as it pertains to debt. We're going to talk about how energy is converted into debt. We're going to talk about trust. Okay. More of a continuing conversation of my previous video yesterday. If you haven't seen it, go tap into my previous video. How to begin reclaiming your energy. And ultimately, man, we're going to wrap up by making sure you guys know how to do this properly. Okay. Everything that I talk about, yes, this may be coming from a more, I'll just say for some people, it may not be more of a tangible conversation, but we're going to bring it back to the tangibility of everything. Yes, we're going to be talking about the spiritual sense, but we're going to be bringing it back to the tangibility and how you're going to be able to utilize this and what legal merit comes behind it. So make sure you guys stick all the way to the end so that you guys know exactly how to do this. Okay. Now, let's first talk about how debt is really just a claim against your energy. Okay. Most people don't know that all debt is based on a presumption that you owe. But what if I told you that you didn't owe? Okay, before I really dive into that, I want you guys to understand that debt is not real. We talk about this all the time. Okay, you assume that you actually owe something, but that's not really true. Every debt is really a lien against your future energy output. All right, banks and agencies monetize your signature, quotations, your energy, to create negotiable instrument. So understand that debt isn't money owed, it's energy promised. But what if that promise was made under false pretenses? So let's talk about that real quick. We all know, especially if you tap into my YouTube videos, that when you originally sign a promissory note or a loan agreement, that loan agreement is a promise to pay, which is also a negotiable instrument that the banks use as a financial asset. Okay. Because if you look up the definition of negotiable instrument under UCC 3-104, it says that banks exchange this with the Federal Reserve in order to get the money that you promised to pay for. But what if I told you that they don't actually loan you money? What if I told you that they don't actually create, or not create, but what if they don't fund you through their reserves? What if I told you they're not even risking anything at all? Okay. And the whole premise of saying that you owe is to, number one, take your energy in the future. Because if you assume that you owe something, right, you will then go to work, right? You will work to pay that debt back. And just think about this constant cycle of us going into debt constantly. And then a lot of us go to work to pay debt. You know what I mean? And then we'll do that, put ourselves at a higher level, and then get more debt to grow our status, whether we get a bigger house, a better car, get student loans, whatever the case may be. We take out a loan or try to want to take a trip, or whatever the case may be. This is all just put in place and in your face so that you can exchange your energy for debt. that you quote unquote owe. Now, what's the definition of energy? Definition of energy, in my opinion, is time, labor, and attention. Okay? And when you are spending your time, labor, and attention, that is more valuable than money. So they want you to be in a constant cycle of you spending your time, labor, and attention so that you don't focus on what's really true. You dig me? We're going to get real deep today. So make sure you guys are taking notes. You feel me? We've talked about this before, and this is just going to reinforce everything that I'm talking about. Now, let's just talk about where the shadow originates, okay? At birth, you are issued a trust account, SKV. I mean, you hear these things all the time, SKV, trust, and you know, people talk about the straw man and, you know, all of these pieces that, you know, a lot of us are still trying to, you know, overstand, okay? Give me 1 second. SKV Act, Section 16. When I pull up the SKV Act, SKV Act of 1666, okay? It really just breaks down, and this goes back to British law, enacted to address the issues of property rights when someone went missing or was presumed dead after being absent from the country for 7 years. It claimed to provide a legal framework for managing estates and ensuring the rights of heirs and creditors in such situations. So before I really dive into that, when you look at, and they made multiple different SKV acts or updated this for many years, but long story short, what the SKV Act pretty much gave companies or anybody the ability to take ownership over a dead person. If a person was presumed to be dead, then they can create a digital version of them, okay? And around that time when they created the SKV Act, they actually, anybody who became a citizen of the United States was considered dead or lost at sea. And this is why they're able to create a straw man and attach a trust to it or an estate to our names, okay? Now, unless you reclaim that, then you're still considered dead. This is why people talk about reclaiming their status and sovereignty and things of that nature. But understand, your social security number is tied to a legal fiction, all caps name. Your all caps name, there is you, and then there's an all caps name. When you look at your birth certificate, when you look at your when you fill out a job application, when you get back your SSN, or when you look at your driver's license, it's all in all caps. You dig me? That's not for no reason. Okay, they put it in all caps because that declares that as a legal fiction. That declares that as a business. When you look at a business, when you look at an LLC, notice how it's in all caps. Okay, and that's what a legal fiction is. Okay, it's really a business. Okay, LLC is a fiction as well. Okay, it's just a piece of paper. So creditors claim against that fiction, not you, the living being. So when you are in debt, the thing that is in debt is the legal fiction, not you physically. Okay? Because there's nothing that you as a physical, you cannot be in debt. Okay? According to the law of the land. Okay? Especially in the sense that you're in debt based off of interest and money that wasn't even loaned to you. Okay, you have rights, and a lot of people say, well, you know, it is our right to live free and not be bound by terms and rules. That is true. That is very true. But when you have two versions of you, and they are treating that other version of you, which is just a piece of paper, which actually is bound to those rules because it's technically dead. It technically has no rights. As a matter of fact, it's not technically, it doesn't have a right. Okay, a living being has rights, but a dead corporation doesn't have rights like a human. So we want that dead corporation to have human rights, but that's not the case. Okay, you do actually have the rights. You know that, right? It's just that when they are speaking to the fiction and you are inherently treating yourself as the fiction, then yes, you fall under the jurisdiction of the fiction. You very much don't have rights. When you write on that paper your all caps name, and you don't make the distinction that you're not that, you are just the authorized officer of that, then yes, they're going to treat you like the fiction. All right. So The concept that I'm going to introduce is that straw man versus the living soul. Your living soul is this right here. The person that's talking to you right now is the living soul. What's within you right now. That the person that is in this body, the soul that's in this body, you dig me, is the living soul. And the straw man is a piece of paper. Okay? It's a document. I mean, this is just my journal, but it's a document. All right? Just like a business, just like an LLC. So then when we talk about us signing commercial contracts unknowingly, not knowing that it's going to maneuver in our fiction, this is where we get to the point where public debt is tied to private people. Now, we look at 31 USC 5118. It talks about public debt obligation, and public debt is of the obligation of the United States, but only in the case of a living person. Okay? What if I told you that that straw man was connected to the United States, and this is why that straw man falls under the jurisdiction? Okay? So you've been casting energy in the wrong direction, and they've been catching the overflow. So when you don't understand who you are or overstand who you are in this economic system, or what is put in place to not only confuse you, but for them to take ownership over you and wrap you in their jurisdiction unknowingly, they essentially have the power that is actually yours. Okay? So let's just talk about how energy is converted into debt. All right? Before we get deep. When you sign a loan, your signature is the source of funds. Okay? Understand that. That is not a loan agreement. That is actually a promise to pay note. Under UCC 3-104, it explains what a negotiable instrument is. It means a unconditional promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money. Okay? And what if I told you that banks use negotiable instruments to secure your funds or create your funds? Okay? Then you can look at, people will say, okay, well, the banks say that, there is a legal tender. Okay? When you look at the definition of tender, it is to unconditionally offer money or performance to meet an obligation. So a lot of times they'll say that you only can pay in legal tender, but this is the definition of tender. Okay? A legal negotiable instrument means an unconditional promise or order to pay a fixed amount of money. And then the definition of tender means the same thing, an unconditional offer of money or performance to meet an obligation. Okay? See, your contracts don't require you to pay, more requires you to perform. Okay? So understand that the lender doesn't loan anything, they actually monetize your energy. Okay? When you think about what full faith and credit is based off of as it pertains to the United States, and why the United States has the value that it has now, is because it makes money off of your labor. It builds energy off of your labor. Okay? And you can look at modern money mechanics. I mean, they don't talk necessarily about the energy, but it talks about how they're not actually loaning money. Okay? They're exchanging and giving us promises back. Okay? Filings show your name and credit are securitized. So you can actually look up the UCC filings that banks actually file, and you can see if a bank sold your debt or sold your loan or sold your promissory note. That's what securitizing is. Okay? So I want to bring up a few definitions that I believe is key. So what I want to talk about is UCC 1-201, which breaks down the definitions, just general definitions that you'll see in the UCC, but I'll go straight down to the word person. Okay? It means an individual, corporation, business trust, partnership, excuse me guys, limited liability company, association, joint venture, governmental subdivision, agency or instrumentality, public corporation, or other legal commercial entity. So you guys may look at that and say, well, you just said a person is I'm a person, right? Or you'll see many times person in the Constitution, okay? And it may have many different meanings and things of that nature, but in this case, person means a corporation, just keeping it plain and simple under the UCC. But It isn't just limited to you as a living, breathing human being. All right. It includes those entities as well. Okay. So this how it ties to what I'm talking about. This supports the idea that debt is not always tied to the living being, you, but to a person they created or presumed. All right. Such as the legal fiction, such as a trust set up in your name, such as an estate created under your birth certificate. So when a collector says that you owe, they're really speaking to the person under UCC terms, which could be a trust you didn't know you were managing, a corporation account that you never formally accepted, and a public estate that has been unclaimed. Bottom line, they presume that you are liable only if you operate as the person. Okay, remedy begins when you shift your role to trustee, grantor, or creditor and stop standing as the debtor. Okay, so obviously, yes, your straw man is the debtor, but if you're the one that starts to say, hey, I'm the one who created the credit, I'm the creditor, then now they have to treat you as such or prove that you're not. Okay, they say that they're the creditor, then they are giving you false and misleading information. So when we talk about just person, just when you see person, just know that they're talking about the corporation version of you. Okay, now we go to the FCRA, Fair Credit Reporting Act, 15 USC 81. Okay, you'll also see the definition of person under 15 USC 1681A. Okay, it says means any individual, partnership, corporation, trust, estate, cooperative, association, or governmental subdivision. Okay, so these are some key things to just be aware of. Then also you can go to the Truth in Lending Act, 15 USC 1601. Okay, well, it's not 1601. We want to go to 1602, and this is where they talk about the term person meaning a natural person or an organization. Okay, and this is just under the Truth in Lending Act. Okay, so as it pertains to lending, all right, they're talking about both, which is very interesting. Okay, so be very careful and understand the definitions as it pertains in what section and what type of agreement we are talking about. Okay, because if we're talking about a lending agreement, then person may mean just a natural person or an organization. Okay, and right now it says that an organization means a cooperation, governmental subdivision, agency, trust, estate, partnership, cooperative, and association. Okay, so when they say that a creditor only refers to a person, they're specifically talking about this definition. Okay, not the definition under the UCC. Okay, now another thing I want to tap into is the definition of a signature. Okay, a signature is a person not liable on an instrument. A signature. A person is not liable on an instrument unless the person has signed the agreement, the person is represented by an agent or representative who signed the instrument, and the signature is binding on the represented person under Section 3-402. Okay? So, what this means is that no one can be held responsible for a debt unless their signature is on the financial instrument, loan, promissory note. The signature equals agreement. No signature equals no obligation. So here's how this connects to the aspect of shadow energy. Okay? Debt is the shadow unclaimed energy because your signature is the energy. When you sign, you create the instrument, the assets. You authorize the creation of credit, and you give them permission to bind the contract. But here's the twist. You sign as the debtor because that's the role that they give you. But under trust law and commercial remedy, you could instead sign or respond as the trustee or creditor, which flips the liability. So here's the bottom line. If your signature created the credit, you are never the borrower. You are the source of value, and under UCC 3-401, this supports the argument that you are only obligated when you unknowingly sign on as the debtor. So the whole premise of me bringing this up is, look, an obligation isn't created unless you sign, meaning that the credit isn't created unless you sign. Depends on how you're looking at it, okay? It's not like they are signing it. It's not like they can sign it and create the credit. They cannot do that. It's only you can. But you sign thinking that you are the debtor. Okay, so 1-201 pretty much explains that the system is dealing with entities, not people, which is why you can redirect the liability using trust. But then also at the same time, UCC 3-401 explains that your energy signature is what creates the obligation. So whoever controls the signature controls the contract. All right, now that we kind of just covered those, I feel like those are some key things that we want to cover. I want to then talk about UCC 1-103, which essentially just breaks down the fact that common law and equity apply when the UCC is silent. So long story short, if there's a case where I feel like when it comes to, and I talked about this in my last video, but the UCC is very rigid and is very specific about certain policies and things in that nature and rules and regulation. But and the UCC goes based off of, you know, procedures and things in that nature. But when we start to get to a place where things become more emotional coercion, or, you know, things that are not directly highlighted in the UCC as a violation, this law very much says that when it's something that is not like very clear but has caused harm, then you can go based off of common law and equity. Okay, equity in the case of this could just be in the aspect of fairness. All right, because someone can say something is fair, but if the judge is going based off of the procedures, the procedures may seem like it's fair on the commercial side, but, you know, when you start to incorporate common law or equity, now it's based off of trust and things that are honorable. All right, things that are actually fair, providing real justice. Okay, they borrow your life force and then charge you interest to access it. And this is where the common law and the equity would come into play, because when you start to challenge them and say, hey, look, well, if I provided the source, why am I paying back? Why am I paying you for something I created? Okay, so let's just talk about how you're going to use trust to contain your energy. Number one, you create a private trust, because that private trust will separate you from the liability. Okay. Number two, the trust will manage your property, contracts, and obligations with legal protection. So you can essentially start to communicate with debt collectors through your trust. Remember, make sure you're creating a private trust and not a public trust. Yes, you can go on the IRS website and you can create a trust on the IRS website. Okay, and you can go and do revocable trust, irrevocable trust, whatever the case may be. But if you don't create a private declaration and you don't create that private trust on your own before you actually get your EIN, then it will be considered public. Okay, and when you do that, you want to make you as the grantor and reclaim authority over your estate. So when you create your trust, then that's when you want to take that asset and put it within your trust, which will be your straw man. You can use this through a UCC filing, which will be your, you know, other assets and things of that nature that are connected to the straw man. And now taking that from the straw man and putting it under the private trust, now you can start to have that communication as it regards to your trust and get it off of your straw man, which pretty much is more in the public eye. So if you don't have these negative demerits in the public eye, and now they're attached to the trust eye, the trust, you don't have to use that for business purposes, especially if you create an ordinary trust. Okay, I want to mention that and this is under UCC 26 CFR 301-7701-4 trust. It breaks down the definition of an ordinary trust and a business trust. Make sure you are not creating a business trust. Make sure you are creating an ordinary trust, because this is what is actually private. Come to this section of my fault, I didn't pull it up. Ordinary trust versus a business trust. Okay, so, or you will create it for a purpose. But what I will tell you guys is, if you're wanting to go the route of settling debt or negotiating debt or even protecting your asset, you want to go with the category that falls under ordinary trust. Come to 26 CFR 301.7701-4. Learn about it. Get comfortable with the information. You don't want to create a business trust, because this is what's taxable. Okay? If you create an ordinary trust, this is not something that you would conduct business with. This is something that you would use to protect your assets and manage your assets, and also communicate with debt collectors. Okay? Then we want to talk about the aspect of revocable and irrevocable trust. The irrevocable trust is something that cannot be changed. Okay, once you create it, it cannot be changed, not even a grantor. So you have to be very specific on how the purpose of this trust before you create it. All right, then we go to the aspect of a revocable trust. A revocable trust is something that can be changed. All right, just to make it more in layman's terms. Then I want to talk about the difference between a grantor, a trustee, and the beneficiary role. So let's talk about the grantor. The grantor is also the creator, okay? The grantor is the person with all the power, okay? They create the trust, they transfer the property and rights or obligations into the trust, and they define the rules of the trust document, okay? So we look at this, think of the grantor like an author of a contract, the one who sets the terms and initiates everything. So when you think about it in the remedy process, you are the grantor when you create a private trust to transfer the liability of debt out your name into the trust. And this role gives you the most power and authority, especially in private administration. So that's the grantor. Then we're going to talk about the trustee. The trustee is the one with the legal title, the manager, the person who's more of an admin of the trust. What do? They manage the trust and handles property or responsibilities per the grantor and instructions, has the fiduciary duty, a legal responsibility to act in the best interest of the beneficiary, and can interact with the public on behalf of the trust, responding to debt collectors. So think of the trustee like the CEO of a company. They don't own it, but they run it according to the mission, okay? In your remedy process, you assign a third-party trustee, or you can act as a trustee yourself in a private trust, and only in a private trust you can act as a trustee as yourself. And when communicating with creditors, it's more powerful to respond as a trustee for your private trust instead of responding as the debtor. So when you respond as the debtor, you'll get different responses versus responding as the trustee of the trust, okay? Now, the beneficiary is the recipient who essentially gains all the benefits, okay? It's exactly in the name. So what they do, they receive the benefit of the trust, okay? Whether it's income, discharge, debt, protection, and privacy. They have no control but all the benefits, and cannot be the same as the sole trustee in most legal structures, okay? But in the aspect of a private trust, okay, the beneficiary is like a stockholder. They profit from what the trust produces but don't run it. In this process, specifically as it pertains to remedy, you can name the family, business, or even yourself in equity, not in law, as the beneficiary. This allows you to live in benefit while separating control and creation, which gives you maximum protection, okay? So these work together in remedy because you as the grantor can assign the debt to the trust. You can have you or a third party manage the communication with the creditor, and the beneficiary receives the relief. No longer personally liable, protected assets, and they now have discharged debts, okay? So if you want to learn more about the trust model and things in that nature, I'll go ahead and include that in the complete debt guide as well, okay? Now, wrapping everything up here, okay? Because we come into this 30-minute mark, okay? A trust isn't paperwork. It's a vessel to contain and direct your energy, okay? So when you understand how to use a trust properly, you are more reclaiming your power as the creditor, as the creator, okay? And you are taking on those liabilities and the things that hold your power away from them. And you're taking ownership over that energy that should be yours, okay? So here's how to begin reclaiming your energy. Number one, learn how to notice contracts you've entered, even silently, okay? Begin with a private irrevocable trust structure like I just talked about. Use consumer law to challenge fraudulent debts under 15 U.S.C. 1692G, looking at the Truth in Lending Act, understanding the UCC. Declare your capacity as man or woman and not a debtor, and you can do this through an affidavit of truth. And ask yourself daily, where am I leaking energy? Where am I not receiving the benefit of myself? Okay? And debt only exists when you have forgotten your authority. So most of the times we're here because that debts in that energy exchange is unclaimed. So when you reclaim the energy and the shadow disappears, it's time to remember who you are and start directing your life force with intention. A lot of times we come in a place where the reason why we're here today is not because like this is what it's supposed to be. It's really not supposed to be this way, but they have put so many things in system to make you forget about your energy. They put so many things in place to distract you from who you truly are. And that's what the Matrix is about, distracting you from the truth. Okay. And the truth is that you have more power than you think you have. The truth is that there are things that you can actually do: paperwork, trust, administrative process, private communication, whether you're going to do it as a debtor or whether you're going to do it within the trust. Either way, you have a way to be able to communicate. And there are stronger ways to communicate if you go through the trust. And this right here positions you to reclaim all of the energy that's duly yours. Okay. Yes, the stuff may take some time to learn. The stuff may take, energy, like we talked about, time, labor, and attention. But if you're putting that time, labor, and attention into reclaiming more energy back, it's very much worth it. So this is exactly why I do what I do, not only to help people reclaim their energy, because you can get everything that I talk about on my YouTube channel for free. But let's just say you wanted to learn more. Let's just say you wanted to use some of the energy that I put into this, whether it's the trust model, whether it's understanding how to create a trust, whether it's understanding how to communicate with a debt collector. This is the energy that I put in the Complete Debt Guide that you can go ahead and exchange your energy for. And it's only a small amount of energy. Okay. So go ahead and tap into the Complete Debt Guide. You get the Complete Debt Guide, you become an affiliate, lifelong affiliate, and you can essentially refer other people and make 30%. It was 25%, but now you can make 30%. Okay. Number two, if you want to work with me one-on-one, go ahead and click the link down below. Tap into that one-on-one mentorship. All right. This is for people who want to build wealth, not for people who just want to pay off their debts. If you want to pay off your debts, go ahead and get on the Complete Debt Guide. Because if you go and tap into that one-on-one strategy call and you ask me 1,000,001 questions about how to pay off your debts, I'm just going to tell you to pay them. Okay, I'm going to tell you to take the money that you make from your job and put it on your debts. You dig me? But if you want to reclaim your energy and you want to have a different level of knowledge so that they are not taking advantage of you, then tap into that one-on-one mentorship. Okay. Number three, follow me on Instagram if you want to be motivated, if you want to stay in the energy, if you want to be on the same frequency as me, if you want to be updated on my YouTube channel, and more importantly, be just tapped into the community, tap into my Instagram at biz.nick, man. Now, comment below if you ever felt your energy was being stolen through debt, your time, labor, and attention. If you got all the way to the end, remember to like, subscribe, turn on the post notifications, because I do post daily content Monday through Friday, because you're about to learn how to operate above the system and not under it. I love you guys. Remember to comment the word discharge if you got all the way to the end, and I'll see you next time.